Part 1. The Discovery. The forest was darker than it should have been. Even with the storm clouds choking out the moonlight, Ethan thought the shadows seemed to have a weight of their own, as though they weren't just absence of light, but something solid, pressing down on him. The trees grew so close together that their branches twisted overhead like broken arms, forming a jagged canopy. When the wind moved, the whole forest groaned like a living thing. Ethan stopped and looked back. Claire's flashlight bobbed behind him, her blonde hair plastered to her forehead by rain. Marcus and Daniel followed close, the beam of Marcus's headlamp slicing through the mist. None of them spoke. The only sound was the crunch of damp leaves under their boots and the far-off growl of thunder. They were supposed to be hunting ruins, old bunkers, forgotten tunnels, wartime relics. Ethan ran a small online channel, Urban Shadows, where they filmed abandoned places and whispered their way through creepy footage for views. This trip had been Marcus's idea, a legend about a train from World War II, lost in the forest, swallowed whole by time, a train that had never reached its destination. "Keep going," Marcus urged, his voice breaking the silence. "It's not far." Ethan raised his camera, filming as he walked. "We've been hiking for hours. If this is a dead end—" "It's not," Marcus cut him off. "I found the coordinates on an old military forum. There's something here, I promise." Claire shivered and pulled her jacket tighter. "You said it was a train used for soldiers?" "And prisoners," Marcus said. His voice was steady, but Ethan thought he saw something flicker in his eyes, a thrill, like he wanted this to be more than just an abandoned relic. "They say it vanished, like the whole convoy disappeared overnight. No survivors, no bodies found." "Comforting," Daniel muttered, his breath white in the cold air. "Exactly the kind of place we should be wandering into during a storm." But no one turned back. The first sign was the track, half buried in weeds and moss, a pair of steel rails cut through the trees, warped and rusted but unmistakably man-made. The explorers froze when they saw it. "There," Marcus said triumphantly. "Told you." They followed the track, brushing away vines and wet branches. Then Ethan's flashlight found it. A wall of iron, streaked with rust, standing in the middle of the woods like a forgotten tomb. The train. It loomed before them, massive and silent, its cars stretching into the darkness. Rainwater dripped from its sides. Broken windows gaped like empty eye sockets. The front engine was half crushed by fallen trees, its mouth of steel twisted into a frozen scream. Claire's voice was barely a whisper. "It looks wrong." Ethan felt it too. Not just decay, but something heavier. As though the train had soaked up every ounce of misery from the war and carried it still. The doors resisted at first, but Marcus forced one open with a crowbar. The screech of rusted metal echoed too loudly, as if the forest itself were listening. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the scent of mold and iron. Their flashlights revealed narrow aisles, rows of decaying seats, and walls stained with black streaks that might once have been blood. Dust swirled like ash in the beam of light. Ethan lifted his camera. "Urban Shadows, Entry 1. We found it. The lost wartime train." His voice shook, and he hated that the camera would pick it up. Claire trailed her fingers across the nearest seat, then pulled her hand back sharply. "It's damp." "No," Daniel whispered. "That's sticky." They all looked. A dark smear glistened faintly on her skin, fresh though the train had been abandoned for decades. Claire wiped it off on her jeans, her face pale. "This place feels like a coffin." The deeper they went, the stranger it became. At first, the cars were empty, just seats, shattered glass, and rust. But then they found things left behind. A pair of boots neatly placed beneath a seat, a dented canteen, still half full of brown water, a torn uniform sleeve pinned to the wall with what looked like a bayonet. Marcus crouched to examine it. "This is authentic, from the war." His voice was reverent, almost hungry. Ethan wasn't so sure. If this was just abandoned, fine. But why would everything still be here? Why hasn't anyone stripped it? No one answered. Halfway through the third car, the train seemed to exhale. A long, low groan rippled through the metal. The explorers froze. "What was that?" Claire asked, clutching Ethan's arm. "Just the storm," Daniel said quickly, too quickly. But Ethan glanced at the windows. Rain lashed against the glass outside. And yet he thought he saw movement in the reflection. A row of figures seated where no one sat. He blinked and it was gone. At the fourth car, the doors slammed shut behind them. The bang was so sudden, so final, that Claire screamed. Ethan dropped his camera. Marcus swore and spun back, wrenching at the handle. It didn't budge. It locked itself, Daniel said, his voice strangled. How? How can it lock itself? Marcus didn't answer. His face was pale now. The storm outside raged louder, but in here the air grew deathly still. The silence pressed against their ears, and then the train shifted. The floor vibrated, subtle at first, then stronger, as though the engine were coming to life. Dust rained from the ceiling. Lights overhead flickered once, dead bulbs glowing faintly before dying again. Claire whispered what they were all thinking. It's waking up. Part 2. The Awakening. The moment the doors slammed shut, the train seemed to shudder like a living beast. The explorers stood frozen in the dim glow of their flashlights, the silence between them broken only by the faint hum of metal vibrating under their feet. Then, with a screech that echoed through the cars, the lights overhead flickered to life. Dead bulbs glowing faintly yellow as if powered by something unseen. Ethan raised his camera with trembling hands. Are you getting this? His voice was a whisper, but it felt wrong, swallowed by the stale air around them. The train jolted forward. No conductor, no engine, yet it moved. The sound of steel grinding against steel filled the air, and the explorers stumbled into the seats as the car lurched into motion. Claire pressed her face to the window. There are no tracks, she whispered. The forest outside had vanished. In its place, black tunnels stretched endlessly, walls smeared with shadows shaped like grasping hands. Daniel backed away from the glass, his breathing ragged. This isn't real. It can't be real. Then the figures appeared. At first, Ethan thought they were shadows, but the longer he stared, the clearer they became. Rows of soldiers sat in the seats, ghostly uniforms stained dark, their faces hollowed, eyes glowing faintly like embers. Across from them, prisoners slumped in chains, their mouths open in silent screams. The explorers were surrounded, trapped in a nightmare of the past replaying itself. Claire clutched Ethan's arm. They're watching us. Marcus, though pale, leaned forward. It's history. It's them, the ones who never made it out. One of the soldiers turned its head, slow and deliberate, locking its burning gaze onto Marcus. His breath caught in his throat. The ghost raised a skeletal hand, pointing at him. Ethan's flashlight flickered. For a split second, Marcus wasn't Marcus anymore. In his place sat a corpse in uniform, eyes sunken, skin stretched tight over bone. Then the light steadied, and Marcus stumbled back, shaking his head violently. No, he muttered. No, that wasn't. A sound cut him off, chains dragging across the floor. Daniel spun, his light snapping toward the aisle. Nothing was there, yet the sound grew louder, closer, until it circled them like an animal hunting. The air turned suffocating. Ethan gasped as something invisible pressed against his throat, cold fingers tightening. He dropped his camera, clawing at his neck, eyes bulging in panic. Claire screamed his name and grabbed him, pulling with all her strength. The pressure released suddenly, sending Ethan sprawling to the floor, choking. What the hell was that? Daniel shouted, his voice cracking. But the train wasn't done. Marcus stumbled toward the window, maybe looking for escape, maybe just desperate to prove they weren't trapped. His face went white as he saw his reflection. Not himself, but his reflection with its throat slit, blood pouring down the glass, smiling. Marcus reeled back with a cry, shaking his head. It's not me. It's not me. Claire's sobs filled the car. The ghostly passengers never moved, never blinked, yet the air buzzed with hatred, as though they fed on the explorers' terror. The train screamed around a curve. No track should exist, yet it sped faster and faster into the abyss, dragging the living into its cursed journey. The lights flickered again, plunging them into darkness before surging back, each time revealing more horrors. A soldier standing in the aisle, bayonet dripping, a prisoner staring with hollow eyes, lips mouthing silent words, blood blooming across the seats like fresh stains. Daniel slammed against the door, pounding until his fists bled. Let us out! Let us out! The door rattled once. Then a whisper slid through the car, so low it seemed to crawl inside their skulls. No one leaves. The explorers huddled together in the flickering light, surrounded by the dead, realizing at last the truth. They weren't visitors anymore. They were passengers. And the train wasn't stopping. Part 3, The Final Ride. The whistle screamed. It was no ordinary sound. It tore through the explorers' ears like the shriek of something alive, dragging them deeper into madness. The floor vibrated, the walls shook, and the cursed train plunged forward into tunnels that shouldn't exist, carrying them toward an end none of them wanted to face. Ethan clutched his camera to his chest like it could save him, but the lens only reflected horror. Each time the lights flickered, the passengers of the dead grew clearer. Soldiers rotting in their uniforms, prisoners with their chains still clamped to bone, nurses with hollow sockets where eyes should have been. Every seat was filled now. The train was alive with the weight of the forgotten. Claire gripped Ethan's hand so hard her nails dug into his skin. "We have to get out! There has to be a way!" "There isn't!" Marcus cut her off, voice cracking. His eyes darted around wildly, his face soaked in sweat. "Don't you see? We're already part of it. We boarded, and now we're trapped, like them." "No!" Daniel screamed, slamming his fist into the door. His voice was ragged, his hands slick with blood from pounding uselessly. "I won't die here." The lights flared, blinding for a second, and when they dimmed, a figure stood in the aisle. A conductor. His uniform was blackened, his cap tilted low, but where his face should have been was only a gaping hole, darkness spilling out like smoke. He lifted a gloved hand and punched their tickets in the air, the sound echoing like gunshots. Claire's knees buckled. Ethan pulled her close, but his own body trembled as the conductor's empty face turned toward him. The train jolted violently, hurling them into the seats. When Ethan opened his eyes again, the windows no longer showed tunnels. Instead, they looked out onto a battlefield, mud, fire, bodies strewn across endless ground. Explosions lit the night sky, and soldiers screamed in agony. The train was passing through the war itself. Daniel pressed his forehead to the glass, shaking his head in disbelief. "It's taking us back. Back to the night it all ended." As if to prove him right, the car filled with the sound of boots. Ghostly soldiers rose from their seats, bayonets fixed, faces twisted in hatred. Prisoners stood too, their chains rattling like funeral bells. The explorers were hemmed in on all sides, the dead closing in. "Stay together!" Ethan shouted, dragging Claire and pulling Marcus with his other hand. But Daniel broke away, wild with panic. He charged down the aisle, screaming, "I won't die here! I'm not one of you!" He shoved past the ghosts, but their hands reached for him. When they touched, his scream turned into a strangled gurgle. His skin drained of color, his body convulsed, and before their eyes, Daniel became one of them, his eyes empty, his mouth slack. He slumped into a seat, a prisoner among prisoners. Claire's shriek pierced the air. "No, Daniel, no!" Ethan dragged her back as Marcus staggered in shock, his lips trembling. "It took him. God, it took him." The conductor stepped forward, raising one skeletal hand. The car door creaked open on its own. Beyond it, another car waited, filled with shadow thicker than tar. A voice whispered through the darkness, not from any mouth but from the train itself. One by one, all must ride. Marcus tried to bolt. "Not me. Not me!" He sprinted for the opposite door, slamming his shoulder into it, but the glass showed no exit. Only a reflection, his reflection, wearing a soldier's uniform, a bullet hole clean through his skull. His body stiffened. He let out a sound that was neither scream nor breath as the reflection reached out from the glass and pulled him inside. One moment he was there. The next, the seat across from Ethan and Claire was filled by Marcus's corpse, helmet tilted, blood dripping endlessly. Claire collapsed to her knees, sobbing. "They're all gone. Ethan, we're next." Ethan pulled her up, forcing her to move. "Not yet. Not if we fight." But the train didn't care for defiance. The whistle shrieked again, and the lights exploded in a storm of sparks. Darkness swallowed the car. When the glow returned, only Ethan and Claire remained breathing. Every other seat was filled with the dead. The conductor loomed over them, faceless, his hand outstretched. A final invitation. Claire shook her head violently, tears streaming. "I don't want to die here. I don't." The shadows surged, cold hands wrapped around her ankles, dragging her down. Ethan held on, pulling, screaming her name, but the dead were stronger. Her body jerked as she was wrenched away, swallowed by the seats, until nothing remained but her scream echoing through the car. Ethan was alone. The train slowed. The battlefield outside faded into mist. A station appeared, a forgotten platform, crumbling stone, overgrown with weeds. The whistle blew one last time as the train screeched to a stop. The doors opened. Ethan stumbled out, gasping, onto the silent platform. He spun, ready to see the others follow, but the cars were empty. The seats were bare. The train stood quiet, lifeless, as though it had never moved at all. He took one step back toward it, his body shaking, when he caught his reflection in the window. Not himself. A soldier, hollow-eyed, dead. The whistle screamed again. When the mist cleared, the platform was empty. The haunted train had vanished, waiting in silence for its next set of passengers.